And to do,
Okay, so did it ask you if you wanted to go on to the cloud or your local
not,
computer?
did not. That's why I don't want to.
You,
This
you
is
you're
this is not our
recording.
normal process. I tell you what, let me stop the recording.
Yeah, so it's recording in the cloud then anyway. I think when you record in the cloud, you can't record on your computer.
Yes, it
That,
says, are you sure you want to stop recording in the cloud? I'll
yeah.
continue. What does yours say? Does yours?
I don't. I paused it earlier, so.
I think
Anyway,
you have to start the computer first and then the cloud. And if you've got the cloud running, the computer will stop it and
That's correct.
override it.
That's what
So,
I'm saying.
oh,
All right. Thank you, Harvey. Good morning and welcome everyone to our spotlight for the 2024 election propositions presented by the League of Women Voters of Marin County. I'm Gary Gonzer, the president of ESCOM, and will be your ESCOM host for this presentation. You've already met Harvey Abernathy. He will co-host and support us on all the tech side of the house. Now, Lynn Dooley will be our League of Women Voters host for their presentation with co-host Carol Joy Harris. Good. A bit of background. For over 100 years, the League of Women Voters has been empowering voters, and this is across the US, and defending democracy. They are a diverse, nonpartisan, grassroots group of women and men with a longstanding tradition of educating voters. They envision a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate, which is why we're here. That's quite a mandate and one we all take very seriously. Today's presentation will last about 90 minutes. So go ahead, ask questions on chat at the end of each segment. Every proposition will have a particular segment. So at the end of each segment, ask your questions. We will ask the host the questions in person. So they go on the record. This presentation is recorded, as you know, and shared and will be shared on the ESCOM website at www.escom.marin.edu. Now, help me welcome Lynn Dooley with the League of Women Voters. Good morning, Lynn.
thank you, Gary. What a nice introduction. I appreciate it very much. So I am, as Gary mentioned, Lynn Dooley, and this is Carol Joy Harris. Carol Joy will be helping me with this presentation. We are with the League of Women Voters, and just to add a little bit to Gary's kind introduction, the League is nonpartisan. We never support or oppose any political party or candidate. So, but we do have two different branches of the League, and I wanted to explain that because that sometimes comes into people are confused or question about that. We have a branch of our league called advocacy, where we advocate for or against policies in the public interest by establishing a league position. Positions are taken after rigorous study, sometimes over many years, and member agreement and consensus. This is the branch of the league that the endorsements of state, regional, or local measures fall. The other branch of the league is the voter education branch, and that is the branch under which this presentation falls. Our intention is to give you information that is nonpartisan, again, never supporting or opposing any political party or candidate, but allows you to become an informed voter about the California state ballot propositions. So the way we put this together was we had a team of 40 volunteers from both the Marin and the Sonoma League of Women Voters. We got together and formed teams to research each of these 10 state ballot propositions. We used trusted resources and put them together into a script that is a standard for the League across the country. It's been used for many years. It starts with a question. If you answer yes to the question, you would vote yes on the measure. If you answer no to the question, you would vote no on the measure. We then give you some history about the proposition, the situation. We give you what the proposal or the proposition would change, alter. We then give you some fiscal information, some supporter, opponent, and campaign financing information. Then once we took the script, we put it together into a recording. We're going to play these recordings for you and pause after each one and do our best to answer your questions. As Harvey mentioned, would you please put your questions in the chat and direct them to the host? A note about the content in the presentation. The fiscal information comes from the state's Legislative Analyst Office, which acts as the legislature's nonpartisan fiscal and policy advisor. The campaign financing came from the Secretary of State's Campaign Finance Filing and Disclosure System. We put the videos together at the end of August, so that campaign finance information was based on August 21st generally. We have new information as of October 14th and 15th, so Carol Joy will update that information for you after each of the propositions before we take your questions. So a note, everyone in these videos are league volunteers. We are not professionals and we did not use professional equipment. So please keep that in mind and be kind. And we're going to start with Proposition 2.
Hi, I'm Becky Bingay,
And I'm Carol Joy Harris.
and this is California State Proposition 2. You will see it on your ballot as authorizes bonds for public school and community college facilities. It is a legislative statute. Carol Joy, what is the question raised by Prop 2?
The question is, should the state authorize $10 billion in general obligation bonds for repair, upgrade, and construction of facilities at K-12 public schools, including charter schools and community colleges?
Now, what is the current situation? How many schools and colleges are there in California?
Currently, there are about 10,000 K-12 public schools statewide, including about 1,300 charter schools and 115 local community colleges that offer associate degrees and other programs for adults.
Is there information on the current state of California public schools?
Yes, according to a 2020 publication from the Public Policy Institute of California, 38% of California students attend schools that don't meet minimum facility standards, and 15% of students attend schools with extreme deficiencies such as gas leaks, power failures, and structural damage.
Who pays for facility costs related to these schools and colleges?
The state and the school districts usually share the cost for renovation and new construction almost equally. The state uses voter-approved bonds for its share of these costs. Both school districts and community college districts are expected to pay the remaining project costs using local funds.
And what does Proposition 2 propose?
Well, Prop 2 authorizes $10 billion in state general obligation bonds for repair, upgrade, and construction of education facilities.
And how would that be distributed?
$8.5 billion of that would be allocated for renovations, repairs, and construction of K-12 schools, and $1.5 billion would be allocated for community college improvements. Of that money, Prop 2 allows up to $115 million to be used for reducing lead levels in water at public school sites.
How would the funds be awarded?
K-12 funds would be awarded after a competitive application process on a first-come, first-served basis. Extra funding can be allocated to build a new classroom or to renovate an existing classroom to be used for transitional kindergarten. This extra funding would also cover projects supporting low-income students, English learners, or foster youth.
Does Prop 2 cover all these costs?
No, districts would need to raise their own local bonds and apply to the state facilities program for a matching grant to receive funding.
How are these funds awarded to community colleges?
Colleges would submit a plan listing their statewide project priorities. The governor and the legislature would then select specific projects to fund.
And is there oversight on community college funding?
Oh, yes. The districts would be required to complete certain tasks to help ensure that the bond funds are spent as intended.
What is the fiscal impact of Proposition 2?
There would be increased state costs of about $500 million annually for 35 years to repay the bond. Payments would be made from the state general fund. This would be less than 0.5% of the state's total general fund budget.
So what do supporters say about Prop 2?
Supporters say any school bond placed on the ballot is not going to cover the enormous needs of K-12 schools and community colleges, but this money would help address the most urgent needs. They say that the funds to make the basic structural repairs needed at every school are lacking. Students need safe spaces to learn in order to reach their full potential. Supporters also say that Prop 2 would increase access to quality, affordable higher education for all Californians, including returning veterans. It would allow more students to start their college education and transfer to a four-year university without crushing debt.
And what do opponents say?
Opponents say bonds are borrowed money that must be paid back, plus interest, even if that means cutting vital programs to do it. They say that children in school today would be drowning in new debt for decades if Prop 2 passes. Opponents also say that it's reckless to borrow billions more to pay for more school buildings when district enrollment is declining in both K-12 public schools and community colleges.
Now, Carol Joy, can you tell us about campaign financing?
Sure, Becky. Through August 21st, a total of $1.8 million has been contributed in support of Prop 2. You can see the top contributors there on your screen. And in opposition, no contributions have been filed to date.
In conclusion, what does a yes vote and a no vote mean?
Okay, a yes vote supports issuing the $10 billion in bonds for repair, upgrade, and construction of public education facilities. And a no vote opposes issuing this $10 billion in bonds.
Thanks, Carol Joy.
You're welcome, Becky. As of October 14, in support of Prop 2, an additional $7.9 million has been contributed for a total now of $9.7 million. The top contributors are the California Teachers Association at $2.1 million, the Coalition for Adequate School Housing Issues Committee at $1.7 million, the California Building Industry Association for $1.7 million. There still have been no contributions in opposition.
So thank you, Carol Joy. There doesn't seem to be any questions, Gary, yes?
I didn't see any come in, so I think
I have one on Prop 2.
Okay.
And the question is, so areas with low ability to raise local funds for school would not fare well, as they wouldn't be able to get the state funding? That's a question.
Okay, so the question, and a good question. Thank you. So it's true that the funds are awarded with matching funds needed. The percentage of matching funds depends on the type of school that is applying. So for instance, schools that have special needs and are not in high income areas, they will receive a higher percentage from the state. They will not have to come up with the same amount of money. And school districts that are unable to raise at least $15 million that are from local bonds will be able to apply for some additional state funding. So there is that element that they still would have to come up with $15 million to ask for additional funding. So yes and no to answer to your question.
Thank you, Lynn. I have another one here.
Okay.
You mentioned a 35-year period. What was this for?
Yes, so the money that's borrowed is paid back over time with interest. And the amount of money that's paid back is divided up over 35 or 40 years for bonds usually. That is something that is standard for bonds. And if you look at your voter education, your voter information guide, that there's my background. Yeah, the one that you get from the state on page 64, it gives you a really good summary of how the California bond system works and what our current debt load is and how they divide up bonds over time, spreading it out over those 35 or 40 years.
Very good.
Okay.
All right. How is this? Okay, one supplemental question. How is this repaved bond? Okay,
Okay.
funded.
Okay, so the general obligation bonds from the state are repaid from the general fund budget. The local bonds are repaid by property taxes, but Proposition 2 and you'll see Proposition 4, both are repaid from the general fund budget. And the money is generated by selling the bonds to investors that then get repaid from the general fund budget over time, which is why that 35-year period. So
Gotcha.
Gary, I think we should move on. What do you think?
I think it's true. No more questions.
Okay, let's go into Prop 3.
Hi, I'm Suki Rob Wilder,
And I'm Carol Joy Harris.
and this is Proposition 3. You'll see it on your ballot as a constitutional right to marriage. It's a legislative constitutional amendment. Carol Joy, what question does Prop 3 pose?
Proposition 3 poses the question, shall California's Constitution be amended to recognize that marriage is a fundamental right regardless of sex or race, and remove language stating that marriage is only between a man and a woman?
And what's the background to Proposition 3?
Well, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in 2015 that all state laws that ban or do not recognize marriages on the basis of race or sex are unconstitutional. This ruling is based on the Due Process and Equal Protection Clauses of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. California already complies with this ruling, but the California Constitution still contains language that says marriage is between a man and a woman.
So what does Prop 3 propose?
Prop 3 proposes amending the California Constitution to recognize marriage as a fundamental right and to remove language that conflicts with federal rulings.
And what are the fiscal effects of this change?
Prop 3 would not change who is allowed to marry in California, so this means there would be no change in revenues or costs for state and local governments.
So what do supporters say about Prop 3?
Supporters say Proposition 3 protects every Californian's right to marry, regardless of gender or race. And they also say Prop 3 updates our state constitution to match what the federal courts have said about who can marry, reflecting current court decisions and our values as Californians. They also say Prop 3 is supported by a broad and bipartisan coalition of civic and faith leaders, as well as civil rights leaders.
And opponents? What do they say?
Opponents say Proposition 3 removes important protections for marriage while pretending to expand rights. They say a fundamental right to marry means it would remove protections against child marriages, incest, and polygamy. They also say same-sex marriage has been legal across the country since 2015, so Prop 3 is fixing a problem that doesn't exist.
And what about campaign financing for Prop 3? Can you tell us about that?
Sure. The $2.3 million has been contributed in support, and no dollars have been contributed in opposition. See the top contributors on the screen there.
So, can you tell us what a yes vote and a no vote mean?
Sure. A yes vote means the California Constitution would be amended to recognize marriage as a fundamental right, regardless of sex or race, and remove language stating that marriage is only between a man and a woman. And a no vote means the California Constitution would not be amended.
Thank you, Carol Joy.
My pleasure, Suki. As of October 14th, Prop 3 support now totals 3.1 million, up from 2.3. Top contributors are the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria at $1 million, Senator Tony Atkins Committee at $300,000, and the California Teachers Association issues PAC at $200,000. And there still have been no contributions in opposition.
Thank you. So some things that we've been asked over and over, and I want to clarify, we do fact check all of the information we present in our support, in our current situation, and all of the background, the proposal changes, the fiscal impact. What we don't look at too carefully until we've heard it 20 times is what the supporters say and what the opponents say. What the opponents say in this is that this would change the fundamental right to marriage. And the fundamental right to marry is just the legal right to marry as recognized by the Supreme Court. This would not change anybody who wants to marry in California. The current law stands. It also mentions that bigamy, polygamy, and incest and child marriage would be impacted. And that is also not the case. Incest and polygamy are completely illegal in California and every state in the country. And child marriage is still legal in California, but this will not change that. Child marriage is legal with the consent of one parent for any age child, which I know is shocking, but that is the case. Prop 3 does not affect that in any way. Gary, are there any questions?
Yes, one question, one comment. This session will be recorded and it will be posted after the recording, after this is over, on the ESCOM website. And I'll give all that information at the end. So if you don't get the details now, you can look at it again. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, there is a question here. Is there other legislation that protects against child marriage in California, since there is no minimum age for marriage in California?
Yeah, as of now, there's no action being taken on that front.
All right.
All right.
My questions. Thank you.
Okay, then let's move on to Prop 4. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Therese Scherer, and this is Jim Masters, and this is California Proposition 4. You'll see it on your ballot as authorizes bonds for safe drinking water, wildfire prevention, and protecting communities and natural lands from climate risks. It is a legislative statute. Jim, can you please tell us what the question Proposition 4 raises?
Sure. Proposition 4 raises the question, quote, should California borrow $10 billion in bonds to fund environmental infrastructure projects aimed at conserving natural resources, as well as responding to the causes and effects of climate change?
And what is the current situation around these issues?
Currently, the state pays for many activities aimed at conserving natural resources, as well as responding to the causes and effects of climate change. Over the last 10 years, the state of California has paid out $13 billion annually on natural resources and climate-related disasters, with about 15% of this coming from bonds. There are a few $1 billion remaining from prior climate bonds that have not been committed to specific activities.
What are some of the current areas of climate focus?
Climate focus is on increasing available water, conserving fish and forests, improving state and local parks, wildfire protection, and mitigating sea level rise, among many others.
And how are these activities funded now?
Funds come from local, state, and federal sources. The state can pay for these activities upfront or by using bonds. Local governments also pay for water, infrastructure, and local parks. And the federal government contributes funds to things like improving local drinking water systems and building energy infrastructure.
What does Prop 4 propose?
Prop 4 allows the state to sell $10 billion in bonds to protect natural resources and for climate-related activities.
Who would receive these funds?
Money would be offered as loans and grants to local governments, Native American tribes, nonprofit organizations, and businesses. Money would also be made available for state agencies to spend on state-run activities.
How would the funds be distributed?
38% of the funds would go for safe drinking water, groundwater storage, wastewater recycling, and flood control. 15% would go for forest health and wildfire prevention. 12% would go for dealing with sea level rise along coastal areas. 12% would go for land conservation and habitat restoration. 8.5% for energy infrastructure and renewable sources of energy. 7% to expand, renovate, and repair state parks. 4.5% for protecting communities from extreme heat, and 3% for farms and agriculture to improve soil health, reduce air pollution, and use less water.
Does Prop 4 have any other requirements?
Yes, it requires that 40% of the funds be used to directly benefit communities that have lower incomes or are more vulnerable to impacts of climate change. It also requires regular public reporting on how the bond money is spent.
What would the fiscal impact be?
It would increase state costs by about $400 million annually over 40 years to repay the bond. This is 1/2 to 1% of the general revenue fund per year.
What do supporters say?
Supporters say, given the threat the state faces from wildfires, water pollution, and extreme heat, the need for more spending on these issues is urgent. They say wildfire smoke caused more than 50,000 premature deaths in just one decade, and nearly 1 million Californians lack access to safe drinking water. And they say communities need to adapt to climate change and reduce our climate pollution right now. This is not a problem that can wait until it's convenient to fund in the budget.
And what are opponents saying?
Opponents say the cost of interest on this bond is too high. These projects should be funded from the regular budget without taking on debt. The funds voted on will be paid for by future generations who did not have the opportunity to vote for this measure. And they say the proposed uses should be separated out for funding initiatives and distribution.
What does campaign financing look like?
$170,000 has been raised in support. See the top contributors on your screen. And $0 have been contributed in opposition.
So in summary, what does a yes vote and a no vote mean?
A yes vote approves the state sale of up to $10 billion in bonds to fund various activities aimed at conserving natural resources and responding to the causes and effects of climate change. And a no vote means the state would not borrow $10 billion in bonds.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Therese.
As of October 14, total contributions in support of Prop 4 are $9 million, up from $170,000. The Nature Conservancy at $2 million, the California Council of Land Trusts Action Fund at $1.2 million, and the Committee for Clean Water Natural Resources and the Trust for Public Land at $1.1 million each. Still no contributions in opposition.
Okay, so Gary, any questions?
No questions on this proposition at all.
Okay, then let's move right along to 5. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Barbara Strong, and this is Bob Pendole, and this is California State Proposition 5. You'll see it on your ballot as allows local bonds for affordable housing and public infrastructure with 55% voter approval. It is a legislative constitutional amendment. What question does Proposition 5 raise, Bob?
Well, Barbara, the question is, should the vote requirement for local governments to issue bonds for affordable housing and public infrastructure projects be lowered from 2/3 to 55%?
How do local governments currently fund affordable housing and public infrastructure projects?
They typically issue general obligation bonds to pay for housing assistance programs and public infrastructure projects such as roads, hospitals, fire stations, water treatment facilities, and libraries.
What are general obligation bonds?
General obligation bonds allow local governments to borrow money and repay it with interest over time. These bonds must be approved by voters and are paid for by increased property taxes. Proposition 13 amended the state constitution to limit property taxes to 1% of assessed value, with certain exceptions, including bonds issued by school districts for construction or repair.
How are these bonds currently approved?
Well, before cities, towns, counties, and special districts can issue bonds to pay for affordable housing or public infrastructure projects, they must be approved by a 2/3 supermajority of voters. School district bonds, which require 55%, are the only exception.
What does Proposition 5 propose?
Prop 5 would amend the California Constitution to lower the vote requirement from 2/3 to 55% to approve general obligation bonds. These bonds would fund local housing assistance programs, including affordable housing construction and a wide variety of public infrastructure projects. It would allow local governments to assess property taxes above 1% to repay these bonds, adding this exception to the Prop 13 limit.
How is affordable housing defined?
Prop 5 defines affordable housing as developments that are affordable to households earning up to 150% of a county's median household income.
Will there be oversight?
Yes, the local jurisdiction would be required to conduct an annual audit to ensure that the funds are being spent as intended. The audits would be released to the public and submitted to the California State Auditor.
What would the fiscal impact be?
A lower voter approval requirement would likely result in more local general obligation bonds passing. This would increase the funding available for housing assistance and public infrastructure. The amount of increase would depend on decisions by local governments and the voters, and the cost would be paid for with higher property taxes.
What do supporters say about Proposition 5?
Supporters say California has a deficit of 2.5 million homes. Prop 5 can make California more affordable and ease this severe housing crisis. They say this is a public safety issue. Public safety specific bond measures have been supported by more than 55% of the voters, but they failed because they did not attain the 2/3 approval. They also say lowering the vote threshold to 55% creates parity with school districts and cities, counties, and special districts. School districts won voter approval for lower thresholds 2 decades ago.
And what do opponents say?
Opponents say Prop 5 undermines Proposition 13's check on local government's taxing authority and erodes property tax safeguards. They say Prop 5 opens the door for massive new tax hikes for property owners and increased rents for residential and commercial tenants. And they say the proposition language on public infrastructure is so vague that virtually anything can qualify.
Can you tell us about campaign financing, please?
Sure. $2.5 million has been contributed in support and $28.5 million has been donated in opposition. You can see the top contributors on your screen.
In closing, what does a yes vote and a no vote mean?
A yes vote means that the vote threshold to pass local bond measures for housing assistance and public infrastructure would be lowered to 55%. And a no vote means that the vote threshold would remain at 2/3.
Thanks, Bob.
You're welcome, Barbara.
As of October 14, 8.3 million has been contributed in support, up from 2.5 million. The NPH Action Fund for Housing Justice contributed 4.7 million, joining the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation's 2.5 million contribution. And opposition is still 28.5 million.
I want to make a little point about the opposition contributions. Thank you, Carol Joy. The California Association of Realtors was listed on our slide as contributing I think it was $22 million. When they came out in opposition, the writers of Prop 5 said, wait a minute, we don't want the California Realtors to be opposing us. So they added a ban on local governments using the money from Prop 5 that would come in as housing bonds to buy up existing single-family homes to convert them into affordable units. So that is now banned, and the California Realtors Association no longer opposes this proposition. But the $22 million stands and is used to support the Howard Jarvis portion of this bill. The other thing to add that we get a question about is, would Prop 5 impact local bonds that are on the November ballot? And if Prop 5 passes and local bonds that are for affordable housing or public infrastructure are on local ballots, and they would then, in retrospect, only need 55% to pass. Okay, Gary, what do you think? Any questions?
Very important.
Yeah.
So far, we have a couple of questions. One is confirmation that this Proposition 5 would increase homeowner tax that is set by Prop 13.
So this proposition has in it that it could increase property taxes, or property taxes could be assessed at higher than 1% to repay local bonds in this category, affordable housing and public infrastructure. If there are a glut of public infrastructure and affordable housing bonds that come through, then property taxes could be assessed at higher than 1%. And that is in parity with the school bond exception to the Prop 13 rule as well.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay.
And one more.
Okay.
There are recent state requirement for local governments to meet a minimum amount of affordable housing in the next 10 years or so.
Probably, but I don't know the answer to that question. So let me find out for you. If I don't know the answer, which is always a possibility because my brain, I'm happy to write it down and I'll find the answer for you. So I'm happy to take that on.
1 year, thank you, Lynn. 1 year is affordable housing requires much more scrutiny. Multi-operational housing, use of factory built houses. Right now, 650 feet affordable housing is renting for 2,600 in Terra Linda. So far, I don't see initiatives that address A to Z housing built or proposed to be built. Is there some coordination in California to stream the development of affordable housing?
That I don't know either.
Okay.
I just know that this would pass a bond that would allow, or a measure that would allow any local bonds to be passed with 55% instead of 2/3.
Exactly. And it brings up all these issues, which
Yeah,
is
exactly. It applies to a lot of different things. So this is a structural thing that will apply to a lot of different areas. So,
very good.
okay, why don't we move on to, yeah, thank you, Gary. Let's move on to Prop 6.
Hi, I'm Lauren Breland Long,
And I'm Caroline Silverstein.
and this is California State Proposition 6. You'll see it on your ballot as eliminates constitutional provision allowing involuntary servitude for incarcerated persons. It is a legislative constitutional amendment. So, Caroline, can you tell us what question Proposition 6 poses?
Sure. Prop 6 poses the question, should California amend the state constitution to prohibit involuntary servitude as punishment for a crime and to no longer authorize the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to discipline any incarcerated person for refusing a work assignment?
And what is Prop 6's background?
California's Constitution mirrors the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which bans slavery and involuntary servitude, except for as punishment for a convicted crime.
What's the current state of involuntary servitude in California prisons?
In California, the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation is currently able to require able-bodied incarcerated people to work. Time credits can be earned for good conduct and for educational or rehabilitative program completion. Those that refuse work assignments can be punished with the loss of privileges.
How many people in California are incarcerated in prisons?
As of May 2024, the population of incarcerated individuals in California is approximately 92,000 people.
Do all incarcerated people in California have work assignments?
No, about 1/3 of incarcerated people in California work at assignments. Some support running the prison facilities, including food service, groundwork, building maintenance, and office administration, and some support the community, like firefighting.
And do they get paid?
California's minimum wage is $16 per hour, and state law permits the Corrections Department to pay up to half of that minimum wage, or $8 per hour. The current average hourly wage is 74 cents per hour.
What does Proposition 6 propose?
Proposition 6 would end the practice imposing mandatory work requirements for incarcerated persons in jails and prisons. Instead, jobs would be voluntary. It would also protect the incarcerated from being disciplined for refusing a work assignment.
Would time credits still be offered?
Yes, time credits would continue to be offered to reduce sentences in exchange for incarcerated persons voluntarily accepting work assignments.
What are the fiscal effects?
State and local criminal justice costs depend on how the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation incentivizes the voluntary work assignments. Costs would increase if wages are increased. Costs would decrease if time credits are increased because people would serve less time. Either way, costs likely would not exceed tens of millions of dollars annually. This amount is less than 0.5% of the state's total general fund budget.
What do supporters say?
Supporters say involuntary servitude is an extension of slavery. Slavery is inconsistent with our values and should be stricken from the California Constitution. They say California is one of just 16 states that still allows involuntary servitude for incarcerated people. They also say Proposition 6 ends slavery in California and upholds human rights and dignity for the incarcerated. Rather than normalizing exploitation, we can prioritize rehabilitation and prepare people in custody to successfully return to their communities.
And opponents, what do they say?
Opponents say if Proposition 6 passes, it could cost the taxpayers more if wages for inmates are set higher. By allowing incarcerated people to refuse work assignments, the management of prisons could become more difficult. And they say this is a reparations effort. The state should instead be focused on the budget deficit.
Would you please tell us about campaign financing?
Sure, $93,000 have been contributed in support of the proposition as of September 3rd, 2024. And as of yet, no contributions have been recorded in opposition. See the top contributors on your screen.
So in conclusion, what does a yes vote and a no vote mean?
A yes vote supports amending the state constitution to prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude as punishment for a crime, and incarcerated people cannot be disciplined for refusing a work assignment. A no vote opposes amending the state constitution to prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude as punishment for a crime.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thanks so much, Lauren.
As of October 14, contributions in support total 1.3 million, up from 93,000. The top contributors are Patty Quillen, philanthropist, at 125,000, Voters Organized to Educate, Criminal Justice Reform, at 120,000, and the Anti-Recidivism Coalition at 100,000. There are still no dollars contributed in opposition.
Thank you, Carol Joy. Any questions, Gary?
I have one question here.
Okay.
Victim restitution included in Prop 6?
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating that?
Okay, is victim restitution included in Proposition 6?
Yeah, that is not mentioned in the proposition.
That's good.
No. Can I just jump back to the question that came up with Prop 5 about the mandatory local governments affordable housing requirements? So according to the California Department of Housing and Community Development, since 1969, California has required that all local governments, cities, and counties adequately plan to meet the housing needs of everyone in the community. The process starts with the housing department determining how much housing at a variety of affordability levels is needed for each region in the state. Then the regional governments develop a methodology, and it has to be put into the general plan. I didn't find anything that is more recent than 1969. Okay, so let's go on. Thank you, Gary. Let's go on to Proposition 32.
Hi, I'm Karen Weeks.
Hi, I'm Sarah Thorpe.
And this is California State Proposition 32. You'll see it on your ballot as raises minimum wage. It is an initiative statute. So Sarah, what does Proposition 32 pose to California voters?
Prop 32 poses the question, should California raise the state minimum wage for all employers to $18 per hour by 2026 and thereafter adjust the rate annually based on inflation?
What's the current situation, Sarah?
Since January 2024, the California state minimum wage is $16 per hour for all businesses except fast food restaurants, which is $20 per hour. State law can set higher minimum wages for employers in some industries. For instance, healthcare has specific laws regarding minimum wage increases depending on the size of the employer, the type of facility, etc.
What does Prop 32 propose?
In 2025, this proposition would increase the minimum wage from $16 per hour to $18 per hour for employers with 26 or more employees. Employers with 25 or fewer employees would have to pay a minimum wage of $17 per hour. Then, in 2026, the minimum wage will be $18 per hour for all employees.
And will there be any further adjustments?
Yes, starting in 2027, minimum wage will be adjusted annually based on inflation. The state's adjustments would mirror the U.S. inflation rate, but will never be less than 0 or more than 3.5% per year.
And what would the fiscal impact be of these changes?
That would depend. Higher minimum wages tend to push up wages for other workers. Businesses paying higher wages would likely pass increases along to customers, and higher wages could reduce some business profits. On the other hand, with increased incomes, there could be fewer people enrolled in programs like Medi-Cal, which could lower state and local government costs. The change of revenue could reduce the state's general fund, but likely that change would be less than 0.5% of 1%.
And what do supporters say about Prop 32?
Supporters say every Californian who works a full 40-hour week should be able to afford life's basic needs. People need to be able to afford rent and feed their families. They say increased income boosts the economies of local communities and creates more jobs in the communities. And taxpayers should not subsidize corporations that choose to pay low wages, enabling those corporations to keep profits for their owners.
And now what do opponents say?
Opponents say Prop 32 forces small businesses to increase prices, adding to inflation and raising the cost of living in California even more. They say Prop 32 costs jobs with the greatest impact on teens and people of color in entry-level jobs. And they say the market, not politicians and bureaucrats, ought to dictate the financial growth and success of working men and women in California.
What does campaign financing look like for this proposition?
$11.5 million has been contributed in support of Prop 32, and $55,000 has been contributed in opposition. You can see the top contributors on the screen.
So in summary, what does a yes vote mean and a no vote mean?
A yes vote approves increasing the state minimum wage to $18 per hour by 2026. Thereafter, the rate adjusts annually based on inflation. A no vote means the state minimum wage remains at $16 per hour.
Thanks so much, Sarah.
You're welcome, Karen.
As of October 15, total support is 11.7 million. Top contributors are Joseph Sandberg at $10 million and Kevin DeLeon for Lieutenant Governor at $200,000. In opposition, $571,000 has been contributed. Top contributors are Western Growers Issues PAC at $260,000, the Ag Council of California at $184,000, and the Dairy Farmers of America at $60,000.
Thank you. So just a note, the current $16 minimum wage also does get adjusted by inflation the same way the $18 per hour was described in the slides. So that is something that we need to add. Gary, any questions?
There's one here. Does this proposition affect the current minimum wage in the fast food industry?
No, this fast food is currently at $20 and would stay at $20. It would not affect that.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank
So there was a question, I think, earlier that came in from someone about Prop 6. Are prisoners required to work outside of the prisons?
Yeah.
And that is a good question. I do not know if they're required to work outside of prisons. I do know that they are able to work outside of prisons. Businesses are able to employ incarcerated people. I'm not sure if that is something that is required. I also know that firefighters the firefighting element of incarcerated work is not required. If someone is able-bodied and identified as someone who would be invited to work as a firefighter, they would not be obligated to do that. They are accepted from this proposition. So I can find out, I haven't been able to find out, but I can try and find out if they are required to work outside of prison.
There
Okay.
you go.
All right. Oh, so also mention, oh, is there another question? I'm sorry, Gary.
It just came in.
Okay.
What might be the percentage of increase after 2026? Or is there no information yet on this expected increase?
Yeah, for the proposition would say that all businesses would be paying $18 per hour for minimum wage. And after the initial year, it would be adjusted for inflation based on the national inflation average, never less than 0 or more than 3.5%.
Got it.
Yeah. I did think of something else while you were, I wanted to mention that the first 5 that we saw, propositions 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, were all put on the ballot by the legislature. And so the reason for that is in part because they want to put it on the ballot. They think the voters need to have a say. Any constitutional amendment needs to be voted on by the population, and any bond measure must be approved by voters. So those are the ones that have been put on the ballot by the legislature. Numbers 32, 33, 34, 35, 36 have all been put on by petition signature. They are initiative statutes. So 32 was put on by signatures, and we're about to head into the rent control area of 33 and 34, which I'm sure you've been seeing on television. They were both put on the ballot by petition signature, and all 10 ballot measures need to be approved by a simple majority, which is 50% plus 1 vote. And remember, the women got the right to vote by 1 vote. So it's important to vote for sure. All right, let's go on to 33.
Good.
Hi, I'm Mary Topliff.
And I'm Regina Bianucci-Russ.
And this is California State Proposition 33. You'll see it on your ballot as expands local government's authority to enact rent control on residential property. It is an initiative statute. Hi, Regina. What question does Prop 33 pose?
Prop 33 asks the question, should the state law that limits rent control for certain types of property be repealed? And should the state limit the initial rent for first-time tenants in all types of housing?
What's the current law behind Prop 33? And what's the situation?
Rental housing is expensive in California because there's not enough housing for everyone who wants to live here. About 1/4 of Californians live in communities with local rent control. In 1995, the state passed the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. This act limited local rent control laws from applying to single-family homes, condominiums, and housing occupied after February 1st, 1995. Rent control currently only limits rent increases on existing tenants, thereby allowing landlords to reset the rent for a new tenant.
What does Prop 33 propose?
Prop 33 would repeal the 1995 Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act, which prohibits laws imposing rent control on certain housing. Repealing this act would allow local rent control laws to apply to any housing.
Are there any other impacts of Prop 33?
Yes, the proposition would allow cities and counties to limit the initial rental rates that landlords may charge new tenants in all types of housing.
So are existing rental control laws changed?
No, the proposition itself does not make any changes to existing local rent control laws. Generally, cities and counties would have to take separate actions to change their local laws. The state would be prohibited from taking future laws to limit local rent control.
What would the fiscal impact be?
The fiscal effects would depend on how many properties end up being covered by local rent control and how much rents are limited. These things would be decided by future actions of local governments and voters. If local rent control laws expand, local governments could have increased costs to carry out these laws. These costs could range from a few $1 million to tens of millions of dollars annually. These costs likely would be paid for by fees on landlords.
And what are some of the situations that would impact these fiscal effects?
Well, some renters could move less often. Some renters who live in properties covered by rent control could spend less on rent in the future. Some renters who live in properties not covered by rent control could spend more on rent. Landlords could sell their properties to new owners who would live there instead of renting it out, resulting in fewer homes available to rent. And property tax revenues for cities, counties, special districts, and schools could decline because landlords might not want to pay as much for these properties, devaluing rental housing, thus reducing the amount of property taxes paid by landlords.
So what do the supporters say?
Supporters say that the affordable housing crisis is destroying the California dream. Nearly 1 million people have left California in the last 5 years. This crisis will only get worse as young, talented people leave and the needy remain. They say that even if you're not a renter, your quality of life and the value of your property are still harmed by the housing crisis. And every city should decide for themselves whether or not they need rent control and which types of property that rent control would apply to.
So what do the opponents say?
Opponents say that rent control is complicated and leads to unintended consequences. The Legislative Analyst's Office, a nonpartisan government agency, says this initiative could lower the property values on homes. They say that Prop 33 is a Trojan horse that overturns state housing laws, as well as has no protections for renters. This ballot language was challenged by the Yes for Prop 33 campaign, but was affirmed in court. They also say that capping rents for more properties, including ones built after 1995, is essentially a signal to developers to build less, not more, housing units that the state critically needs.
Can you tell us about campaign financing, please?
Sure. As of August 21st, 17 million has been contributed in support and 40 million has been contributed against Prop 33. You can see the top contributors on your screen.
And let's close with what a yes vote and what a no vote would mean.
A yes vote means that state law would not limit the kinds of rent control laws cities and counties could have. And a no vote means that state law would continue to limit the kinds of rent control laws cities and counties could have.
Thank you, Regina.
You're welcome, Mary.
As of October 14, there is 39.7 million in support, up from 17 million. The AIDS Healthcare Foundation has increased their contribution to $39 million, and there is now 100 million in opposition, up from 40 million. The California Apartment Association has increased their contribution to 66 million, and the California Association of Realtors has given 27 million. And real estate investment company Western National Group has contributed 5.6 million in opposition.
Thank you, Carol Joy. Gary?
I have one question here, very interesting. Does this initiative proposition apply to boats that are a primary resident and pay rent to the marina for the necessary berth?
That's a great question. So this proposition does not apply to anything other than what types of housing can have rent control. So if a city and a county decides to put rent control on properties, I would think that I don't know. That's a good question. Let me see what I can find out. But I would think that if it can apply to any kind of housing and a boat is considered a house because you're living on it, then it would apply to you. So, but let me confirm that. And this is also something just we really need to pay attention to the yes and no because it's a repeal. So it's confusing. The yes and no are confusing. So just be sure you understand that. And if you have questions, let me know. But let me look up boats. That's a good question.
Thank you. That's the only question that came in.
Okay, let's move on to 34.
Hi, I'm Megan Stone, and this is Donna Roper, and this is California State Proposition 34. You'll see it on your ballot as restricts spending of prescription drug revenues by certain healthcare providers. It's an initiative statute. Donna, can you please tell us the question Prop 34 puts to the voters?
Sure, Megan. Prop 34 poses the question, should certain healthcare providers be required to spend 98% of revenues generated from the federal discount prescription drug programs on direct patient care?
And what's the background on this prop? Can you give us the current situation?
Medi-Cal is a federal state program that provides health coverage and pays for prescription drug costs for low-income people. The federal drug discount program provides discounts on drugs to healthcare providers like a Kaiser Permanente who meets certain rules.
And who receives federal drug discounts?
Eligible providers are public or private nonprofits that focus on serving low-income people, and state law prohibits providers from charging Medi-Cal more than the discounted price of the drug.
Is there any oversight on these discounts?
There's currently no requirement or oversight on how revenues earned from the federal discount prescription drug programs are spent.
What does Prop 34 propose?
Prop 34 creates new rules about how certain healthcare entities spend revenue from a federal drug discount program. Specifically, the entities would have to spend at least 98% of their net revenues earned in California on healthcare services provided directly to patients or direct patient care.
Would this requirement apply to all healthcare entities?
No, healthcare entities must meet the following criteria. The entity participates in a federal drug discount program. The entity has or has ever had a license in California to operate as a health plan, pharmacy, or clinic, or has had certain contracts with Medi-Cal or Medicare. The entity has a 10-year period where it spent more than $100 million on purposes other than direct patient care discount programs. And the entity owns and operates or has previously owned and operated multifamily housing units with at least 500 violations with a severity level of high.
Is there any oversight in Prop 34?
Prop 34 requires affected entities to report their revenue and expenses annually to the state. The state can charge affected entities fees to cover any enforcement and penalty costs and operating restrictions.
What would be the fiscal impact of Prop 34?
Prop 34 would increase state costs, likely in the millions of dollars annually, to enforce new rules on certain healthcare entities. Affected entities would pay fees to cover these costs.
What are supporters saying?
Supporters say this is a simple case of accountability. When the federal government gives discounts to healthcare providers, taxpayers deserve to know that the money is being used to help the neediest patients. They also say this proposition would provide much needed transparency and rein in abuse.
And what are opponents saying?
Opponents say that Prop 34 is an attempt by the California Apartment Association to harm a specific healthcare provider, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, that supports rent control. They also say that Prop 34 weaponizes the initiative process, so no organization in the future will be safe from retribution.
What about campaign financing?
So far, $18.5 million has been contributed in support and $532,000 has been contributed in opposition. See the top donors on your screen.
All right, wrapping up. What does a yes vote and a no vote mean on Prop 34?
A yes vote means that certain healthcare providers would be required to spend 98% of revenues generated from federal discount prescription drug programs on direct patient care. And a no vote means these new requirements would not go into effect.
Great. Thank you so much, Donna.
You're welcome, Megan.
As of October 15, the total contributions in support are now $36.4 million, up from $18.5 donated by the California Apartment Association. In opposition, the total is $15.7 million donated by the AIDS Healthcare Foundation.
Okay, so this one is very confusing. Gary, are you getting any feedback on that?
Actually, I don't have a question on Prop 34, but I have one on Prop 33. So I
Okay.
had time to think about it and came up with this. What is the existing Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act that this prop is repealing?
what is, so the beginning of that was, what is the,
What is the existing Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act?
okay, got it. So Costa-Hawkins, the only thing that well, that's not the only thing that Costa-Hawkins does, but Costa-Hawkins protects, excludes rent control from single-family homes, condominiums, and housing built or occupied after 1995. So that applies to apartment buildings. So Costa-Hawkins, in Proposition 33, the voters are being asked to remove or repeal Costa-Hawkins so that rent control could be applied to any kind of housing. So that would mean any single-family homes, condominiums, and houses occupied after 1995 would qualify for rent control. But the city or county or special district has to enact rent control. It doesn't automatically impose rent control on any property. This proposition does not impact rent control in any way other than what kind of housing rent control can be on. So if a city or county decides that they want rent control now, then they would not be able to put it on those three qualified types of housing. If Prop 33 passes and a city or county decides they want to enact rent control, they would be able to put it on any housing. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So it's basically just an appeal. It's not about rent control laws, except what they can and cannot apply to.
All right. Now, we have questions coming in on Prop 34. Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah.
Okay. Could you clarify the concern that this initiative has broader applications for future initiative actions? Does that
Okay. Yep. So
Okay.
Prop 34 was put on the ballot by the California Apartment Association. They went out and they got signatures. There are ways to get signatures. You can just go to Safeway and ask people to sign a petition, or you can pay people to go to Safeway and get them to sign a petition. So there are many ways to accumulate the signatures you need to put propositions on the ballot. The California Apartment Association put this on the ballot because the AIDS Healthcare Foundation is reputed to be using the money they get from the federal drug discount program to support things other than their direct patient care. So the AIDS Healthcare Foundation is an organization, a nonprofit organization that has clinics and pharmacies that supports AIDS patients. It also has multifamily housing units that support AIDS patients. And as a result of starting that practice of providing housing for AIDS patients, they got into the business, a secondary line of business, where they own multifamily housing units. They feel that rent control is something that will impact that line of their business. So they are spending money on Prop 33, for instance. They want to get rid of rent control restrictions. So they're spending money in support of Prop 33, and the California Apartment Association is spending money to keep the rent control restrictions because they do not want to have rent control applied to apartment buildings if they can possibly help it. So I know it's really confusing. It's really confusing. So Prop 34 is saying that that the money that comes in from the federal drug discount program needs to be spent, 98% of it needs to be spent on direct patient care if the organization that's getting the money is doing alternative things with it. And the alternative things are those lists of things that we showed you. All right, so the reason that this would be a precedent is because it's really one organization putting a proposition on the ballot to impact another organization. And it's not direct, it's indirect, because they're using the federal drug discount program as the avenue with which to penalize the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. In the future, the proposition process could be mishandled in the same way by allowing anyone with lots of money who has a gripe against another organization, they could go out and get signatures and put it on the ballot. Now, that's always been the case. That's something that can happen. But this has happened now. This is something that is actually a fact. The Apartment Association did this. So it is impactful in the future that it gives other organizations ideas and the opportunity to do it again.
All right, thank you. I don't understand. Here's another question on Prop 34.
Okay.
I don't understand why requiring more money for direct patient care is bad. What is the reasoning by opponents?
Okay. So there's really nothing wrong with making sure that the money goes to direct patient care, except if you get the direct patient care money and you want to spend it on something else. So if the AIDS Healthcare Foundation is using money to support campaign financing and their multifamily housing units, then the idea is we want to put that, not we, but the voters might want to put that back into the bucket that supports the patients instead of the multifamily housing units and the campaign financing.
Great. Is it possible, one other question, last one.
That's
Is
all
it
right.
possible that currently some funds go to necessary research?
You know, that's true. And that would be an interesting thing that the AIDS Healthcare Foundation could come back with, that is something that would fall into the category of direct patient care. But it might limit that. That's true. It might limit research. I'm not sure if the AIDS Healthcare Foundation does invest in research. That's possible. But since this is specifically saying direct patient care, it might impact that, and they might have to go through some legal action to adjust that.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, there's one that came in here now. Explain why multifamily housing was mentioned in Prop 34 discussion.
Okay, so the reason that it's mentioned is because the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, in addition to their AIDS patient relation business dealings, they have a secondary line of business where they own multifamily housing units. So their owning multifamily housing units is the reason that they care about rent control. And rent control is the reason that they're spending money on the propositions.
How intertwined our world is.
I know, these are so related. So the money, the Carol Joy mentioned, you know, there's what, $56 million in $39.7 million in support and $100 million in opposition. That's because this is intertwined with 33. You'll see ads that say vote no on 33 and yes on 34, no on yes on 33, no on 34. It's because those two companies are embattled on this.
Gotcha. Boy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I'm glad we're recording this. All right.
Okay. Are we ready to move on?
Okay.
Oh, okay, let's move on.
Let's do. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's too confusing.
Hi, I'm Carol
Very
Joy
much.
Harris, and this is Diane Rogers. This is California State Proposition 35. It's an initiative statute. You'll see it on your ballot as provides permanent funding for Medi-Cal healthcare services. Diane, can you tell us what question Proposition 35 poses?
Sure. Prop 35 asks voters, should California make permanent the existing tax on managed care organization health plans and require this tax to be used only to fund Medi-Cal healthcare services?
Thank you. And what is the current situation behind Prop 35?
The managed care organization tax is a per month, per person tax imposed on managed care insurance companies like Kaiser Permanente that the state created and authorizes to pay for Medi-Cal healthcare services. Medi-Cal is the state and federal healthcare insurance program for low-income families, seniors, and people with disabilities in California.
Is the managed care organization tax new?
No, the managed care organization tax has been in place since 2009. It's approved every few years by the legislature and federal government. It was last approved in 2023 and will expire at the end of 2026.
And how is the revenue collected by this fund handled?
Currently, this tax revenue is put into the general fund, and lawmakers use it to pay for existing costs in the Medi-Cal program and increase funding for Medi-Cal and other health programs. For instance, the state uses this money to increase Medi-Cal payments to doctors. It is estimated to raise between $7 billion and $8 billion annually.
So what does Prop 35 propose?
Proposition 35 proposes to permanently establish the per month, per person tax on managed care organizations starting in 2027, subject to federal approval. In 2025 and 2026, Prop 35 will impose new rules regarding which Medi-Cal services receive funding from the tax.
Are there rules regarding how the tax revenue collected can be used?
Yes, it requires the state to use tax revenues solely for specified Medi-Cal services. Plus, it prohibits revenues from being used to replace other existing Medi-Cal funding and caps administrative expenses. It requires independent audits of programs receiving funding.
So what would the fiscal effect be of Prop 35?
In the next few years, there will be no changes to state tax revenue. In 2025 and 2026, there would be increased state costs between $1 billion and $2 billion. In 2027 and thereafter, Prop 35's permanent tax on health plans will create new rules about how the money is spent. After the temporary tax ends, the long-term fiscal impact is uncertain due to various rules in the California Constitution that impact the state budget.
And what do supporters say about Prop 35?
Supporters say Prop 35 will improve access to healthcare, reduce emergency wait times, make prescription drugs more affordable, and expand our healthcare workforce. They say this initiative represents the most important investment in California's healthcare in our state's history and will increase access to care well into the future.
And what do the opponents say?
Opponents say restricting how the tax revenue is spent hamstrings future legislators and the governor's ability to balance the state budget. No official opposition group has filed to date.
What is Prop 35's campaign financing?
$33.6 million has been contributed in support. See the top contributors on your screen. And no dollars have been contributed in opposition to date.
So in summary, what does a yes vote mean and a no vote mean?
A yes vote supports permanently authorizing a tax on managed care organizations requiring revenues to be used for increased Medi-Cal programs. A no vote opposes extending the tax on managed care organizations, allowing it to expire in 2026.
Okay, well, thank you, Diane.
You're welcome, Carol Joy.
As of October 15, a total of $52.6 million has been contributed in support. The California Association of Hospitals and Health Systems has increased their donation to $15.8 million. Global Medical Response has contributed $13.9 million, and the California Medical Association has increased their contribution to $11.4 million. There are still no contributions in opposition.
Thank you, Carol Joy. Gary, any questions? Oh, you're muted, sir.
There are no questions per se, thank you. There is a comment. Are there any graphics that might help explain the labyrinthine process of Props 33 and 35? In other words, graphs that would show the time distribution, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't know of any graphs, but you know, the League of Women Voters of California has quite a bit of information on this on their state site. Yeah, so let me, I want to clarify 33 and 34, but let me address something in 35 first, okay? So 35 is this managed care organization tax. So it is a tax on the PPOs, HMOs, that has been in effect since 2009. So Kaiser's and Anthem Blue Cross, anybody who is in that organization, that are insurance companies in that realm, they pay this tax, and the tax goes into a bucket for Medi-Cal. One of the things we didn't say that we should have said is that currently the Medi-Cal funding can be used for Medi-Cal funding, but the governor and the legislature can also move some of that money out and redirect it to other areas if they need to. So it's not locked into these particular Medi-Cal buckets. So the current situation is that the managed care tax goes into the general fund and it's used primarily for Medi-Cal services, but it can also be redirected to other state budget needs if they want. This bill is asking us to vote that all of the money stays only in Medi-Cal specifically, and no money can be redirected. So the general fund it would still go into the general fund, but it would only go to Medi-Cal services. And the services can change, and they have a list of them in your voter information guide as to what would get it and what would not. But that's the big difference between a yes and a no. A yes means that the services would be locked into Medi-Cal and not be able to be redirected. And a no means that it would stay the same and it could be re-upped every couple of years by the legislature and the federal government, and they would still have the opportunity to move things around. Does that make sense?
It does to me.
Okay, well,
Very important.
yeah, I just wanted to clarify. All right, so let's go back to 33 and 34 for just a second. We're doing really well. We've got one more left, and I know we're on time, 11:30 is coming right up. What you're going to vote on in 33, the most important thing is, what are you going to vote on? You're going to vote on 33, whether or not to change what kinds of housing can have rent control. If you vote yes, all kinds of housing can have rent control if your city and town wants to enact rent control and you vote on it. You have that say. If you vote no on 33, it means that the current restrictions stay, no matter whether your city or county puts rent control on. In 34, what you're asking to vote on is, do you care whether the federal discount drug money has to go to direct patient care if it's being misused by certain types of organizations that meet all those criteria? If you vote no on 34, then the money can be used anyway. There's no restrictions. Okay, very, very straightforward. And I also want to say that in Alameda, there was a legislature that was put through that said that rent control would not be removed from houseboats.
Oh.
Back to boats. But Prop 33 would not change that. The cities and counties would have to enact whether or not rent control would go on to any kind of properties, including houseboats. So the fact that there is legislation now means that probably Costa-Hawkins does not apply, and you'd have to have your city or county deal with that independently.
Good.
Okay. All right. All right. So let's go on to 36, and please write me questions because I'm happy to answer them, and I can try and get you information, graphics included. I'll try and do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Caroline Silverstein.
And I'm Becky Bingay.
And this is California State Proposition 36. You'll see it on your ballot as allows felony charges and increases sentences for certain drug and theft crimes. It is an initiative statute. Becky, what question does Prop 36 ask of the voters?
The voters are asked, should there be changes to felony laws and an increase in sentencing for certain drug and theft charges?
What is the current situation?
Currently, people convicted of a felony can be sentenced to county jail or state prison, depending on the crime and their criminal history. People convicted of a misdemeanor can be sentenced to county community supervision, county jail, and are given a fine. In 2014, a law was passed reducing some theft and drug crimes from felonies to misdemeanors.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. Shoplifting items worth less than $950 and drug possession became misdemeanors. If these are nonviolent crimes, the people convicted of these crimes serve time in county jail or receive probation rather than serving time in prison.
So what does Prop 36 propose?
Proposition 36 would change punishments for some drug and theft crimes in 3 ways. First, it would change some misdemeanors to felonies and increase those sentences. For example, theft of items worth $950 or less would become a felony if the person has 2 or more related past convictions. Enhanced penalties could be imposed if an offender steals, damages, or destroys property by acting together with 2 or more other offenders or by causing losses of $50,000 or more. The value of the property stolen in multiple thefts could be aggravated so that a felony can be charged.
What other changes are proposed?
Second, sentencing for fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, or methamphetamine possession could be lengthened and would earn felony sentences to be served in state prison and not in county jail. People convicted of possession of these drugs with 2 or more past convictions for related drug crimes could be charged with a treatment mandated felony.
What is a treatment mandated felony?
Offenders would receive mental health or drug treatment and be offered shelter, job training, and other services. If treatment is successfully completed, the charges would be expunged and there would be no jail time. If refused or failed, the offender would get up to 3 years in state prison.
You mentioned Prop 36 would change things 3 ways.
Yes, third, it would require warnings to convicted hard drug dealers and manufacturers that they could be charged with murder if they continue to traffic in hard drugs and someone dies as a result.
What would be the fiscal impact?
Increased criminal justice system costs could potentially be in the low hundreds of millions of dollars annually, primarily due to an increase in state prison population. Increased local criminal justice costs potentially in the tens of millions of dollars annually due to court-related county jail, community supervision, and court-mandated health and drug-related workload.
What are the supporters saying?
Supporters are saying this bill would reduce much-needed accountability for repeat offenders. And there's a need to discard the pieces of the 2014 law that are making it harder for public safety officials to keep our communities safe.
And what are opponents saying?
So opponents say this ballot measure would cost billions of dollars by increasing the prison population during the time when California is already dealing with budget deficits. And this is a huge step backward that will do nothing to make our communities safer, line the pockets of for-profit prison corporations, and take funds away from successful rehabilitation and recidivism programs.
Can you tell us about campaign financing?
Sure, $9.9 million has been contributed in support, and $1.3 million has been contributed in opposition. See the top contributors on your screen.
In conclusion, what does a yes vote and a no vote mean?
A yes vote would approve changing certain drug and theft charges to felony laws and increasing sentencing. A no vote would oppose changing certain drug and theft charges to felony laws and increase sentencing.
Thank you, Becky.
You're welcome, Caroline.
As of October 15, contributions in support are up to 14.3 million, up from 9.9. The top contributors have increased their contributions, but remain the same. Total contributions in opposition are now 5.9 million. Social welfare organization, the Heising Simons Action Fund, has joined the top contributors with a $645,000 donation. Other top contributors have increased their contributions, but they remain the same.
Okay, so Prop 36, any questions?
No questions on Prop 36 at all.
Okay, so there are a number of resources that are available to give you more background. Keep in mind, there is a lot of information in that voter information guide. And when you read the arguments for and arguments against, you know that would be they're making their case to you. So they're telling you why they think you should vote for or against. Cal Matters is a great resource. Ballotpedia is another great resource. I'll give this information to Gary and Harvey, and they might be able to circulate that somehow. But I just really want to thank everyone for coming. Carol Joy did a great job both on the videos and in person. Dee Dee in the background. I want to thank Gary so much and Harvey both for inviting us and organizing this. And thank you to everyone who came tonight or today to visit with us. We appreciate it. You can see all these videos at marinlwv.org. All the videos are there, as well as scripts. If you don't want to watch the videos, you can read about it. We also have those videos and the scripts in Spanish. So that's available. And we just hope that you have gotten something out of the presentation and that you'll consider joining the League of Women Voters. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Lynn and Carol, for being, our frontline hosts. That's great. And for Dee Dee in the background, of course. Now, and Harvey, who's not in person here, but he helped create this, run it smoothly, and I really appreciate him. A couple of things as we leave. The first off is the website for the League of Women Voters is just that. It's lwv.org, correct?
Yeah, so the US is lwv.org. That's the whole US. The state is lwvc.org. And we are Marin lwv.org.
Put those in the chat if anybody wants
Oh,
to.
thank you, Harvey. There, just asking people to remember this stuff there's too much already and we don't have enough bandwidth.
One thing to remember is this video will be posted on the ESCOM website, hopefully on Monday. People were asking when, so they can distribute it. So that's a nice thing to follow up with. I think that's it. Thank you all for presenting, and for our participants, thank you for attending and watching us. We're here for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, goodbye to all.
Bye-bye.